Today's episode is brought to you by Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/JoshuaVelas and become a $2 backer today and get early access to the new episodes. I'll be leaving a link in the description down below, but for now, on to today's episode. You're listening to the Augmented Experience podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Joshua Velas. I'm a student, musician, and a gamer at heart. Join me as I sit down every week to talk about all the latest news in the technology, business, and video game world. I hope you guys enjoy. Alright, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Joshua Velas. I'm your host as usual, and obviously welcome back to the show. Today's episode 183 of the show. And before we get started into the house cleaning quick, because, well, you guys don't like to do it around here, and it only makes sense that we do it, so let's get on with the house cleaning. Now, I do want to get just the easy stuff out of the way, because obviously, as you can tell, this episode is not one coming at its usual time. So obviously it didn't happen at Wednesday at noon, didn't happen today at noon. And this is a reason why I hate Adobe software sometimes. I do like using it. Oh, well, yeah, because I use Photoshop and then I use Lightroom for editing my photos. But I do agree that, yeah, I've been having this issue for the entire week. So trying to get it resolved is a pain in the butt until Windows finally was like, hey, you want it to work? And then it finally works. So here we are. So we finally can do the episode. So I do apologize for that, since I genuinely didn't have any control because the software was just being really stupid. But here we are nonetheless. I do want to say thank you guys for coming back and listening to today's episode. It really does mean a lot to me. You guys constantly take time out of your days to download these episodes, to share these episodes, to constantly keep letting me know how you feel, because, well, you guys keep coming back and listening to the show, so I must be doing something right. I greatly appreciate that. Also, the Patreon backers, thank you guys for your support. I greatly appreciate y'all. And I did go and fix the Patreon tiers finally, where I just made it very simple. Just basically, it's a $2 tier now. So if you just want early access to new episodes and just support the show, you can just click the link down below and just become a $2 backer. But thank you guys for that. I really appreciate it. But now on today's episode. And generally, I was thinking of changing the topic given how many technical difficulties I was having just to even get this episode out here to begin with. But I decided it was fair that I still talk about what was on my mind. Like, I know the topic, this isn't groundbreaking. We're not going to pretend like this is some new revelation from God himself. But it is something that I've wanted to talk about because it's been on my mind. We're talking about the whole Apple events that are coming. And keyword I use events, given how last year we saw there was multiple Apple events for different products. And it seems like this year Apple will be continuing the trend for multiple events for actual products instead of, normally there's WWDC and then there's the iPhone event, or, in the case of last year where they did, WWDC, they did the developer event, they did the 2 product events at the end of the year. It seems this year that the Apple events that will primarily focus on like the new iPhones, the Apple Watch, and any new product, which we'll get to those in a little bit, is going to be in September. And the rumor is that there'll be 2 of them. However, I don't necessarily care about all the products that are rumored because, we can just list them off right now, just being fair and honest. That the main products that are going to be announced are obviously the iPhone 13 lineup, the Apple Watch 7, the new Airpods 3, the new refreshed iPad mini, the new M1 Mac mini, and then also the 14-inch MacBook Pro and the 16-inch MacBook Pro respectively. Personally, to me, there's only a couple products in that list that genuinely intrigue me, and then one that I just genuinely don't care about. And it's one of those things where I've had this conversation multiple times with a few people. So let's talk about the one that I just genuinely don't care about, even though everyone seems to be so hyped about it, which is the iPhone 13. Yes, we understand that the iPhone 13 will now begin. The main selling point of this phone is going to be the 120 Hz display. The first iPhone to include a higher refresh rate display outside of 60 Hz, which has been the standard on iPhones pretty much since they've existed. That 60 Hz has been the standard, But as we've seen in the land of Android, multiple Android flagship phones or even just budget phones are starting to include 120 hertz or 90 hertz. The trend primarily started with 90 hertz and then it just began to go up and up and up. And here we are. To me, I know a lot of people have been asking me, genuinely, they're just like curious. I have a 12 Pro Max. Do you think I should upgrade to the 13 Pro Max, if they want to call it, just because I want the 120 hertz? And realistically, the 120 hertz is not a feature that I would say is worth upgrading. Granted, I know there's people that will upgrade because they want the 120 hertz, but I don't think the hit to battery life, because if you honestly think that Apple, primarily the iPhones will not have bad battery life with 120 hertz, you're a fool to begin with. Let's just be real here. 120 hertz, higher refresh rates will always ding your battery life. 5G doesn't help either because 5G is very ineffective and it's practically useless. Let's be real here. 5G is useless. It's not going to be useful until another 5 to 10 years at best. Let's just be real here. 5G is not that useful right now. We barely are starting to get decent 4G. I highly doubt trying to push 5G, like, it's not going to be ready. Let's just be real here. It's not ready for mainstream. The downsides that come with it in terms of generating heat, for generating, more strain on your battery, it's not worth it at the end of the day. Now, 120 hertz, I've always been a person that has said on smartphones, anything over 90 is excessive and pretty much useless. Like, I get it, people want smoother refresh rates, and I get it that in the case of Apple, they already had this whole 120 hertz display before on the ProMotion with the iPad Pros when it was first introduced. Granted, it was ProMotion on an LCD, and this time now it's on an OLED, and I get it, doing it on OLEDs is a little bit trickier. It really is trickier. We're just being honest here, especially because Apple has very specific things that they do with their OLED panels on their smartphones with color calibration, and things in that line. I do agree that it's going to be nice to see how Apple decides to go about implementing the 120 hertz, if they go down the ProMotion route or, go down the route of their competitors. It's going to be interesting to say the least. I just personally think it's not worth the upgrade just for that. In my personal opinion, granted, you are allowed to use your money your way because it's your money at the end of the day. I just don't see the value. I don't see the value proposition that comes with the 120 hertz, but I know their marketing team is going to hype it up like it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. We know this. It's the usual song and dance routine with Apple's marketing team, which as a marketing major, I respect because they're still going to be able to get you schmucks to buy it. So, that's just the end of the day, is you guys are still going to buy it. So it doesn't matter what I say or any person that tries to talk bad about that phone on the internet, because you guys are going to buy it no matter what you do. And that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Now, when it comes to the product I'm actually interested in, it's definitely going to be the Series 7 Apple Watch and the iPad mini. I think those two are going to be the standout products of the bunch, primarily due to the fact that, one, this will be the first actual big refresh to the Apple Watch we've seen since the Series 4, when they introduced like the, bigger display and everything after the Series 3. I think the Series 7 is going to be a very interesting upgrade given what we've seen from Samsung's recent offering with the Galaxy watches. I do think that Apple is going to definitely go in a healthy direction with the Series 7. The fact that we're getting a new design, given how Apple seems to be more inclined to go with this more boxish shape, I would say more rectangular. It's not really a rectangular prism. We can't really say that. But more of this, definitely more of a cube shaped with a lot of their products, like squared off edges. They seem to be going more, back to that style. Given how the iPad Pro looks, given how the iPad Air looks now, given how the new iPhones look, it's only fitting that the Apple Watch would join suit. I do think new technologies being added into the Apple Watch will also be useful, because I've said multiple times that the Apple Watch has always been the standard when it came to the smartwatch space. It's primarily for like just a general watch that's useful. Do I think its battery life is amazing? No. The Apple Watches are not notorious for their battery life. They have good battery life, but they don't have like the outstanding, incredible battery life that people would expect from a gadget that's basically your watch, but also an extension of your phone. And I do get where people are coming from with that. I genuinely do. I do think that it's going to be nice given the changes that are going to come with it. I think the new design is it definitely makes sense that it was going to happen, a change in design given where Apple's currently going with their design language. But nonetheless, I do think this is going to be one of the more standout products, and it's generally going to sell well regardless. It's going to sell well regardless. Now, the iPad mini refresh. This is a big one because we haven't seen a new iPad mini since, well, the iPad Air 3 refresh came. It was obviously the one that came before the iPad Air that has the A14 processor. So this is going to be interesting nonetheless because the iPad mini has always been that weird iPad in the bunch, that it's always supposed to be the smaller yet a little bit more expensive than the base iPad, but it's always more powerful, and it's primarily designed as, well, a little just handheld tablet. It's basically just a bigger size phone is really what it is, with bigger screen real estate, bigger battery life. It's one of those things where, yes, I understand why the iPad mini exists. It's a very popular device. The iPad mini is generally one of my favorite iPads ever made, aside from the Pros, because I have a Pro and I personally prefer the Pros. But I do understand for, say, college students or teachers, or even just like even for your kids, I'd say, like, as just a video streaming device, it's a good all-around tablet. Now, I do get it. Some people will be like, well, you get more value out of just buying the regular iPad. If you're really not doing anything crazy, you should just buy the base iPad. But I think the mini is going to be interesting now that it's getting its refresh, better, the newer Apple Pencil support, the better speakers, just better processor and everything. I think it's going to be a good sell. Is it going to sell off the shelf and just go out of stock completely? No. Do I think it's going to sell well regardless? Yes, especially given that, classes are starting to go back to face-to-face. There's still classes that are going to be online. Clearly, not everyone's going to go back to face-to-face. But now that more people are starting to transition to face-to-face classes again, I think college students will be more inclined to buy the mini to have a note-taking device besides their laptop or their PC setups. Because let's be real, it'd be kind of bad to just say that a college student is not going to have a laptop or a PC, because they'll have one or the other or both. I think it only makes sense that for college students, the mini would be a good fit for note taking. Same thing for like medical students. I mentioned this before, how it's just a good way to take notes while you're basically on the field. And it's going to be nice. I think the new improvements in terms of power, the design, just falling in line, because it really was the last iPad that needed to fall in line besides the regular base iPad, which I don't suspect they will change that over to the new design. I'm not 100% confident they will, but it'll be interesting to see nonetheless, if I'm being honest with you. Now, AirPods 3. This one is another product that we knew that has been ready for a while now, but given the current circumstances in the world, it's been pushed back a good amount of times. And we've been waiting this for a while now. Let's just be real here. We've needed a refresh for the AirPods for a while now. It only makes sense that the Gen 2s needed a replacement, and Apple, or specifically consumers, really enjoyed the shape and the feel of the Pro. So it only makes sense that Apple would find a way to find a nice, sweet middle ground between the Pros, and find a middle ground, with the Pros and the regular AirPods. And that's how the new AirPods are going to look, is like we've talked about this before, where it's basically a hybrid of the Pros and the Gen 2s, where it keeps the same shape and design as the Pros, but it doesn't have the ANC or the transparency mode. It's literally just a refresh for the base AirPods like the Gen 2s. The only difference is now they'll be adopting the new design language that comes with the Pros. So I think that's a good fit. I think there's a lot of people that are due for some AirPod upgrades. I know a lot of people have been talking about that, given my case primarily. Like, I took my AirPods in to go get a new battery replacement, since I've had them for almost 2 years now. So it only made sense that I would take them to go get a new battery in, and I'm probably going to do the same for my case, at least before my warranty runs out. But I think nonetheless, for people that are looking for an upgrade for their new AirPods, I think this is a good fit, especially because I get it. There's a lot of people that don't want to drop the big money on the Pros because they just don't care about ANC, or they just don't care about the transparency mode. So I think having this in between is a good idea. Now, the M1 Max. We're talking about 3 different M1 Max. John Prosser has talked about all 3 before on his show. And yes, he's mentioned that we would get an upgraded M1 Mac Mini. Or really the processor would be the M1X or M2, depending on the naming scheme that Apple decides to go with. But the upgraded Mac Mini, the main difference is that, yes, it adopts a smaller footprint that people were asking for. It adopts the new power connector that comes with the new iMacs, which I do think that's really good given the Mac Mini size and, what the Mac Mini represents. I also think that the fact that it's getting a better processor, more, hopefully more RAM, more storage, is definitely going to do this thing wonders. Because I always said that the Mac Mini was the best value out of the M1 Max, given that it's a desktop solution that you could just, it doesn't take up so much room. And the fact that this one takes up even less room and will have more power is really good nonetheless. And finally, we're going to end on the two M1 MacBooks, or primarily the MacBook Pros, because these have been awaited for a very, very long time. People have been wanting a refresh on the 16-inch MacBook Pro, and people have generally wanted a new design to go with a 14-inch MacBook Pro, because people were like, well, 13 inches is great. But I think now that companies are starting to position themselves in more of the 14-inch space, it only makes sense that Apple would transition as well to make a 14-inch MacBook Pro to finally be the replacement for the high-end 13 that came before the the current iPad that we have, or not iPad, but the MacBook Pro that we have right now, the 13-inch MacBook Pro. And to me, I don't necessarily care so much about the 14-inch. I do get why people do care about it, since, well, they wanted more ports with it. And I think it was kind of bull that the base model M1 MacBook Pro only had 2 ports, and it had them on the side where the cable has to reach around and probably damage the cable. But I do think it's nice that we're going to be getting 4 ports, and then the same thing with the 16-inch MacBook Pro. I've always said for the longest period of time, before the M1 Max came out, that the 16-inch MacBook Pro was the best MacBook Pro ever made, that I think it was the best value, that it was the best content creation machine that money could buy. I think it was just a great product overall, and a lot of people liked it. It's just, given the current circumstances of things and given how the M1 processor, turned to be very adequate to being useful, I think it was very shocking that the 16-inch MacBook Pro got put to the wayside, and people have been just clamoring for a refresh, especially given how big the damn thing is, because it's a 16-inch laptop, guys. It's not a tiny thing. It's a pretty big machine. But at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting nonetheless, the fact that we're getting 2 Apple events this month, or at least that's the rumor. Things can change. Let's be honest here. They can change. So let's understand that things are subject to change. But what do you guys think? What products do you really care about the most that are coming out of this event? Because I know it's kind of hard to think about it, given the fact that, well, yeah, the world is still recovering from this pandemic. I get it. Not everyone's wanting to upgrade products. Not everyone wants to go out and buy new stuff, which I agree that if you're just not in a good place financially to go around buying, upgrading stuff that you don't really need, because that's really how I feel about the 13-inch iPhone, or not the 13-inch iPhone, the iPhone 13 is, that's really how I feel about that whole lineup, is the fact that it just doesn't make much sense to get one. It really doesn't. It's just mind-boggling. It's baffling. And I don't think that the iPhone 13 is really worth it, even if it has a 120 Hz display. Granted, I would like to see how it performs, you know, in the real world, because that's what really matters at the end of the day with these products. Is, yes, we can test them in a lab. We can say, oh, based on these circumstances, I'm like, okay, that's great. I appreciate it. I don't care. I want to use this thing in the real world to see how it actually handles real world tasks, real world scenarios, and how does it actually handle things, because that's the only way you're going to know if something is actually good or not, is how does it actually handle being used for its intended purpose, you know? But thank you guys for at least being patient with me. I know this episode came out much later than I wanted it to, but it's just the reality of things, is I didn't really have much control in the situation. But I do thank you guys for taking time out of your day to download these episodes, to share these episodes, to constantly keep letting me know how you feel. I hope you guys have a wonderful and safe weekend. Please, guys, at the end of the day, don't do anything dumb. And I really hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Bye, guys. Take care. Have a safe weekend.
Hey there. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day and listening to today's episode. If you're interested in supporting the show, whether it be financially, clicking the follow button, or just sharing the episode, it all works for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I love you guys to death.